The summer sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty main street of Silverdale, Colorado, as Rose Robbins frantically twisted her wrist against her husband's iron grip, the pain shooting up her arm like lightning through a storm cloud. It was 1878, and in this unforgiving frontier town, a woman's struggles were often ignored, just another unremarkable scene in a place where survival itself demanded all attention. "You're making a spectacle of yourself, Rose," Edgar Robbins hissed through clenched teeth, his knuckles whitening as he tightened his hold. "We're going home, now." Rose's auburn hair had mostly fallen from its pins, cascading in waves around her flushed face as she planted her boots firmly in the dirt. At 23, she had already endured 5 years of marriage to a man who had shown his true colors only after the wedding bands were exchanged. "I told you, Edgar, I'm not going back. Not today, not ever again," she said, her voice steadier than her trembling hands would suggest. Edgar's face contorted with rage, his carefully maintained public facade crumbling as he yanked her arm so violently that Rose stumbled forward, nearly falling to her knees in the dusty street. "You belong to me," he growled, loud enough now that passers-by had begun to slow their pace, though none intervened. None except the tall figure who seemed to materialize from the shadow of the general store, moving with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to facing danger. "The lady doesn't appear to share your sentiment," came the low, measured voice that caused Edgar's head to snap up. Rose looked up through tear-blurred eyes to see a man she recognized from glimpses around town, Adam Prescott, a cowboy who worked at the Carter Ranch outside town. His dark Stetson was pulled low over his eyes, but she could see the firm set of his jaw and the way his hand rested casually near the holster at his hip. "This doesn't concern you, cowboy," Edgar spat, his banker's attire a stark contrast to Adam's worn denim and leather. "This is my wife, and what happens between us is private business." Adam stepped closer, and the crowd that had been pretending not to watch now made no effort to hide their interest. His boots kicked up small clouds of dust as he positioned himself between Rose and her husband, his broad shoulders blocking Edgar's attempt to pull her away. "When a man drags a woman through the street against her will, it stops being private," Adam replied, his voice remaining level despite the obvious tension. "Now, I suggest you let go of the lady's arm before things get unpleasant." Edgar's laugh was harsh and dismissive. "You're threatening me? Do you know who I am in this town?" His grip on Rose's wrist tightened further, making her gasp in pain. "Step aside. I'm taking my wife home." Adam didn't move an inch. Instead, his eyes, a startling blue against his sun-bronzed skin, narrowed dangerously. "Over my dead body," he said, the words hanging in the hot, still air like the promise of a storm. For 3 heartbeats, no one moved. Rose could hear the distant clang of the blacksmith's hammer, the nervous shuffle of onlookers' boots, the sound of her own rapid breathing. Edgar was the first to break, releasing her arm so suddenly that Rose stumbled backward. He pointed a trembling finger at Adam. "You've made a terrible mistake today, Prescott. This isn't over." "For now it is," Adam replied, not backing down, as Edgar retreated a few steps. Edgar turned his venomous gaze to Rose. "Don't think this changes anything. You're still my wife. I'll be waiting at home." With that, he straightened his vest, attempted to regain his dignity, and stormed off toward the bank where he held considerable influence as assistant manager. The crowd began to disperse. The brief drama concluded, though Rose knew better. This was merely an intermission in what had become the tragedy of her life. "Are you all right, madam?" Adam asked, finally turning to face her properly. Up close, Rose could see the small scar that ran along his jawline, the tiny lines at the corners of his eyes that spoke of years squinting against the sun. He wasn't handsome in the conventional way of the dandies who frequented Edgar's social circles, but there was something compelling about his weathered features. Yes, she managed, though the red marks on her wrist told a different story. "Thank you, Mr. Prescott. That was—" She trailed off, suddenly aware of how vulnerable she had become. Where would she go now? What would she do? "Adam," he corrected gently. "And you're Mrs. Robbins, aren't you? I've seen you at church." Rose nodded, self-consciously trying to rearrange her disheveled hair. "Rose," she said, "and I don't think I can go back home, not after this." The reality of her situation was beginning to sink in. bringing with it a wave of fear. In 1878 Colorado, a woman without a husband or family was in a precarious position indeed. Adam seemed to understand her predicament without her having to explain. "My sister runs a boarding house on the edge of town. Decent place, fair prices. She might even have work for you if you need it." Rose hesitated, eyeing the direction Edgar had gone. "He won't let me go so easily. You don't know him." "Perhaps not," Adam acknowledged, "but I know men like him. And I know that no one should live in fear." He gestured toward the livery stable where his horse was presumably tied. "Let me take you there, at least for tonight. You can decide your next move after you've rested." Rose glanced down at her trembling hands, then back up at the stranger who had just put himself between her and harm. 5 years of marriage to Edgar had taught her to be wary of men's motivations, but something in Adam's steady gaze suggested she could trust him at least more than she could trust returning to the house that had become her prison. "All right," she said finally, "just for tonight." Adam's sister, Martha's boarding house, was a modest 2-story structure, painted a faded blue that had once been bright. Unlike many establishments in Silverdale, it was neat and well-maintained, with pots of hardy geraniums adorning the porch despite the summer heat. Martha herself was a revelation to Rose, a widow who had transformed grief into independence, running her business with a firm but kind hand. She was older than Adam by nearly a decade, with the same striking blue eyes but a roundness to her figure that spoke of comfort rather than the hard physical labor that had honed her brother's frame. "Edgar Robbins' wife, you say?" Martha raised an eyebrow at Adam as she led Rose to a small but clean room on the second floor. "Well, that explains the bruises I've glimpsed at Sunday service. Always hidden under long sleeves, but a woman notices these things." Rose flushed with shame, but Martha waved away her discomfort. "No need for that, dear. You're not the first woman to find herself trapped, nor will you be the last. What matters is, you're taking steps now." After Martha left them alone in the hallway outside Rose's room, Adam cleared his throat awkwardly. "I have to get back to the ranch, but I'll check on you tomorrow if that's all right." Rose nodded, suddenly exhausted by the day's events. "Thank you again, Mr. Adam. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there." Something dark flashed across his features. "No one should suffer at the hands of someone who claims to love them," he said quietly, and Rose wondered what experiences lay behind those words. As promised, Adam returned the next day, and the day after that. Sometimes he brought small gifts, a bunch of wildflowers, a book of poetry he'd found at the general store, once even a small sack of peppermint candies that Rose hadn't tasted since childhood. They would sit on Martha's porch, careful to remain in plain sight of anyone passing by to protect Rose's already precarious reputation, and talk. Adam told her about growing up on a small farm in Pennsylvania, losing his parents to influenza when he was 17, and heading west with Martha and her husband. He spoke of the satisfaction of honest work at the Carter Ranch, the peace he found under the vast Colorado skies. In turn, Rose shared her own story, her family's financial troubles that had made marriage to the promising young banker seem like salvation, her gradual realization that Edgar's charming public face masked a cruel and controlling nature. "Why didn't you leave sooner?" Adam asked one evening as the setting sun painted the distant mountains in shades of purple and gold. Rose sighed, rolling a peppermint between her fingers. "At first, I thought I could change him. Then I was afraid. And there was shame, too. Admitting I'd made such a terrible mistake." She looked out at the mountains. "Besides, where would I go? What would I do? A woman alone doesn't have many respectable options." "You're doing all right now," Adam observed. It was true. In the 3 weeks since she'd fled her marriage, Rose had begun helping Martha with the boarding house, cooking, cleaning, keeping the books. She'd even started taking in mending from town to earn a little money of her own. "Only because of Martha's kindness," Rose replied. "And yours." Adam shook his head. "Martha needed the help, and you needed a safe place. As for me—" He trailed off, and Rose noticed a slight flush beneath his tan. Before he could continue, the sound of approaching hoofbeats made them both turn. Edgar Robbins sat atop his sleek chestnut gelding, his eyes cold as he surveyed the scene before him. "So, the rumors are true," he said, his voice carrying across the yard. My wife has become the cowboy's whore. Adam was on his feet in an instant, but Rose placed a restraining hand on his arm. Don't, she whispered. It's what he wants. I've come to take you home, Rose, Edgar announced, as if conferring a great favor. I'm willing to overlook this indiscretion if you return now and resume your duties as my wife. Rose felt her heart pounding, but when she spoke, her voice was steady. I'm not coming back, Edgar, not ever. Edgar's composed expression slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury beneath. You have no choice. The law is on my side. You're my wife, and everything you own, including the clothes on your back, legally belongs to me. It was true, and all three of them knew it. A husband's authority over his wife was nearly absolute. She's made her decision, Adam said, stepping forward despite Rose's attempt to hold him back. I suggest you respect it and leave. Edgar dismounted smoothly, tying his horse to the porch railing. This doesn't concern you, ranch hand, though I understand why you've taken an interest. His eyes raked over Rose in a way that made her skin crawl. She is lovely, isn't she? But make no mistake, she belongs to me. I belong to myself, Rose said firmly, finding courage she hadn't known she possessed. And I'd rather work my fingers to the bone than spend another day under your roof. Edgar's laugh was cold. Bold words from a woman who has never done a day's real work in her life. How long before your soft hands bleed? Before you tire of poverty? Before you realize that your reputation is in tatters and no decent man will have you? He took a step toward her. Be sensible. Rose, come home. Mr. Robbins. Martha's voice cut through the tension as she emerged from the house, shotgun in hand. You're trespassing on my property, and you're upsetting my boarders. I must ask you to leave. Edgar glanced at the shotgun with disdain. This doesn't concern you either, Mrs. Parker. Any threat to the peace of my establishment concerns me greatly, Martha replied calmly. And while you may have legal claim to your wife, you have none to my property. Leave now, or I'll be forced to involve Sheriff Donovan. The mention of the sheriff seemed to give Edgar pause. While the law might support a husband's authority over his wife, public scandal would not serve his career ambitions. With a final venomous look at Rose, he untied his horse. This isn't over, he said, echoing his words from their confrontation in town. One way or another, you'll return to where you belong. They watched in silence as he rode away, dust rising behind his horse's hooves. He means it, Rose said quietly after he'd disappeared from view. He won't stop. Then we'll just have to be ready for him, Martha said, lowering the shotgun. No man has the right to terrorize a woman, husband or not. That night, Rose barely slept, Edgar's threats echoing in her mind. By morning, she had made a decision. She found Adam at breakfast, having stayed overnight in one of Martha's spare rooms, out of concern for Rose's safety. I need to leave Silverdale, she announced without preamble. As long as I stay here, he'll keep coming for me, and eventually, he'll find a way. Adam's brow furrowed. Where would you go? Denver, maybe? Or further. Somewhere he can't find me. Even as she said it, Rose knew how precarious such a journey would be for a woman alone. The Carter Ranch needs a cook, Adam said suddenly. The old one left last month for California, and the hands have been complaining about the trail boss's attempts ever since. Rose stared at him. I can't hide at your workplace. That would be the first place Edgar would look. Adam shook his head. Not if he thinks you've left town. We could spread word that you took the morning stage to Denver. Meanwhile, the ranch is 15 miles outside town, and Mr. Carter is a fair man who minds his own business. You'd have a roof over your head, honest work, and time to figure out your next move. And you'd be there, Martha observed from the doorway, a knowing smile playing at her lips. Adam's ears reddened slightly. I'd be able to keep an eye out, yes. Rose considered the offer. It wasn't a permanent solution nothing could be until she found a way to legally end her marriage, which was nearly impossible in Colorado territory without proof of extreme circumstances. But it would buy her time and distance from Edgar. All right, she said finally. When can I start? 2 days later, Rose found herself bumping along a rutted trail in Adam's wagon, her few possessions packed in a borrowed carpet bag. Martha had helped spread the rumor that Rose had fled to Denver, even going so far as to purchase a ticket in Rose's name that was never used. The Carter Ranch sprawled across a valley flanked by pine-covered hills. the main house a substantial two-story structure of logs and stone. Several outbuildings surrounded it, a bunkhouse, stables, a smokehouse, and a separate kitchen building where Rose would primarily work. Benjamin Carter, the ranch owner, was a gruff widower in his 60s with a no-nonsense manner that Rose found reassuring after Edgar's false charm. "Prescott says you can cook," was his only comment after Adam explained the situation. "That true, or was he just sweet-talking to get you the job?" "I can cook," Rose confirmed, "though I've never done so for so many men at once." Carter grunted. 20 hands at present, plus my foreman, myself, and my son when he's home from school back east. 3 meals a day, bread baked fresh, and coffee always on. Think you can manage?" "Yes, sir," Rose said, with more confidence than she felt. "Good. There's a small room off the kitchen for you. Not fancy, but private. You get Sundays to yourself, unless it's roundup or branding time. Pay is $20 a month plus room and board." He glanced at Adam. "Prescott will show you around." With that, he returned to the paperwork on his desk, conversation clearly over. The kitchen was larger than Rose had expected, with a massive cast-iron stove, a pump for water, ample work surfaces, and a well-stocked pantry. The small room that would be hers was plain but clean, with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a hook for her clothes. After the opulence of Edgar's house in town, it should have felt like a step down. Instead, Rose felt a weight lifting from her shoulders as she set down her bag. "Will it do?" Adam asked from the doorway, concern evident in his voice. Rose turned to him with the first genuine smile he'd seen from her. "It's perfect. For the first time in years, I feel like I can breathe." The smile transformed her face, bringing color to her cheeks and a light to her eyes that made Adam's heart skip a beat. He cleared his throat. "The men eat at 6, noon, and 6 again. Old Tom, that's the cook who left, used to ring that bell outside when the food was ready." He gestured to a large bell mounted on a post near the kitchen door. "I should get started then," Rose said, rolling up her sleeves. "I need to see what supplies I have to work with." Adam nodded. "I've got to get back to the herd, but I'll check on you later, make sure you're settling in all right." As he turned to go, Rose called after him. "Adam." He paused, looking back at her. "Thank you. Not just for the job, but for everything." The first weeks at the ranch were a blur of exhausting work and unexpected satisfaction for Rose. She rose before dawn to start breakfast, spent the morning baking bread and preparing lunch, then began dinner preparations that would feed 20 hungry cowboys by evening. Her hands, once soft and unblemished, became reddened and calloused. Her back ached from hours standing at the stove. Her hair, once carefully arranged according to the latest fashions, was now simply braided and pinned to keep it out of the food. Yet, for all the physical demands, she found herself happier than she had been in years. There was a simple dignity in honest work that Edgar's world of appearances and social climbing had lacked. The ranch hands, initially suspicious of the refined town woman in their midst, gradually warmed to her as her cooking proved far superior to their previous fare. And then there was Adam. He made a point of finding excuses to visit the kitchen, bringing fresh game he'd shot, delivering vegetables from the small garden near the creek, or simply stopping by to see if she needed help carrying water or firewood. Their conversations, once hesitant and focused on her immediate troubles, gradually expanded to include dreams and memories, jokes and stories. Rose found herself watching for him from the kitchen window, her heart lightening whenever she spotted his distinctive stride or heard his laugh among the men. She told herself it was merely gratitude and friendship. She felt that after Edgar's betrayal, she would be a fool to trust her heart again so quickly. Yet she couldn't deny the warmth that spread through her whenever Adam was near, or the way time seemed to pass too quickly in his company. Adam, for his part, found himself inventing increasingly flimsy pretexts to see Rose. He'd always been content with the solitary life of a cowboy, finding companionship enough among his fellow hands and the occasional visit to town. But now he found himself distracted during the long days with the herd, his thoughts drifting back to the ranch house and the woman with auburn hair and quiet strength who had carved out a place for herself against all odds. "You're sweet on the cook," his friend Daniel teased one evening as they rode back to the ranch after checking on a section of fence line. Adam didn't bother denying it. "She's still married," he said instead, the words tasting bitter. Daniel shrugged. To a man who beat her. Don't imagine that counts for much in the eyes of the Almighty, whatever the law says. It's not that simple, Adam replied, though he wished it were. A month passed, then two. Summer heat gave way to the first crispness of autumn. Rose settled into a routine at the ranch, gradually making the small kitchen domain her own. She added curtains to the windows, planted herbs in pots outside the door, reorganized the pantry for greater efficiency. The men's initially awkward deference to her as the only woman at the ranch, besides Martha, who visited occasionally, had evolved into a comfortable respect. Never thought I'd say this about a woman's cooking, the trail boss, a grizzled veteran named Jim, admitted one evening. But you've got old Tom beat by a country mile, Mrs. Robbins. Rose flinched slightly at the name, a reaction Adam noticed from across the dining room. It was a reminder of the shadow that still hung over her new life, the legal ties that bound her to a man she feared and despised. That night, unable to sleep despite her physical exhaustion, Rose stepped outside for some air. The kitchen building was set slightly apart from the main house and bunkhouse, offering her a measure of privacy that she valued. The autumn night was cool but not cold, the sky ablaze with stars that seemed close enough to touch in the clear mountain air. She heard footsteps approaching and tensed momentarily until Adam's familiar figure emerged from the shadows. Couldn't sleep either? He asked, stopping a respectful distance away. Rose shook her head. Too many thoughts. May I join you? She nodded, and he settled beside her on the bench outside the kitchen door, close but not touching. I saw your face when Jim called you Mrs. Robbins at dinner, Adam said after a moment of comfortable silence. It bothers you, Rose sighed. It's not just the name, it's knowing that, in the eyes of the law, I'm still his property, that he could come here tomorrow and demand I return, and legally, no one could stop him. She twisted her hands in her lap. I feel like I'm living on borrowed time. Adam was quiet for a long moment. Have you considered divorce? He finally asked, the word hanging between them like something forbidden. Of course, Rose replied. But you know as well as I do that it's nearly impossible for a woman to obtain one in Colorado territory, especially without proof of exceptional cruelty or abandonment. Edgar was always careful to leave bruises where they wouldn't show in public. Her voice had grown bitter. And even if I could get a divorce, the scandal would follow me forever. What about annulment? Adam suggested. If there were some irregularity in the marriage, Rose shook her head. Everything was legal and proper. Edgar made certain of that. She looked up at the stars. Sometimes I think about just disappearing, taking a new name, starting over somewhere no one knows me. Is that what you want? Adam asked quietly. Rose turned to look at him, really look at him in the silver light of the moon. At some point during these months, this man had become essential to her happiness in a way she hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge fully. I don't know what I want anymore, she whispered, except, she trailed off, afraid to voice the longing that had grown in her heart. Adam's hand moved slowly, tentatively, to cover hers. Except, he prompted, his voice rough with emotion he rarely displayed. Before she could answer, the sound of approaching horses broke the stillness of the night. Adam was on his feet instantly, his hand moving to the revolver at his hip. Stay here, he ordered, moving toward the main yard where lanterns were now being lit as the commotion roused the ranch from sleep. Rose ignored the instruction, following close behind him. As they rounded the corner of the building, she froze at the sight before her. Edgar Robbins sat astride his horse, flanked by three men she didn't recognize. Behind them, Benjamin Carter stood on the porch of the main house, shotgun in hand. This is private property, Robbins, Carter was saying as Rose and Adam approached. Whatever business you have can wait till morning. Edgar's eyes found Rose in the gathering crowd of ranch hands. My business won't wait. I've come for my wife. His gaze shifted to Adam, and to settle accounts with the man who stole her. Nobody stole me, Rose said, stepping forward despite Adam's attempt to hold her back. I left of my own free will because you're a cruel, violent man who treats me like property rather than a wife. Edgar's face hardened. You're making a scene again, Rose. Always so dramatic. He gestured to the men with him. I've brought witnesses from town, respectable men who can attest that I've always been a devoted husband. Mr. Henderson from the bank, Reverend Phillips, and Dr. Morris. Rose recognized them now, all men from Edgar's social circle, all likely to support whatever tale he'd spun. The presence of the doctor was particularly troubling. Was Edgar planning to claim she was mentally unstable? "Mrs. Robbins has been employed at my ranch for nearly 3 months, Carter said, stepping down from the porch. She's done honest work and caused no trouble. I see no reason to disturb her at this hour." "With all due respect, Mr. Carter," Edgar replied, his tone suggesting no respect at all. "The law is clear. A wife belongs with her husband, and her earnings are legally his property. I'm prepared to be generous. Given the circumstances, I won't demand the wages she's earned here, but she will return with me tonight." Adam moved to stand beside Rose, his presence solid and reassuring. "The lady has made her choice clear," he said, echoing his words from their first confrontation in town. Edgar's smile was cold. "Ah, but a wife doesn't get to choose to abandon her husband, does she, Reverend?" The Reverend cleared his throat uncomfortably. "The Bible is clear on the duties of a wife to her husband," he said. "Mrs. Robbins should return home and seek to reconcile with Mr. Robbins through prayer and submission." Rose felt sick. It was happening just as she'd feared, her fragile new life crumbling under the weight of law and convention that gave Edgar all the power. "If she won't return willingly," Edgar continued, "I'm prepared to involve the sheriff. I believe harboring another man's wife against his wishes could be considered a serious offense, Mr. Carter. Not to mention the potential damage to your ranch's reputation." It was a thinly veiled threat, and everyone present knew it. Carter frowned, clearly weighing his options. Rose couldn't blame him if he